Thanks for joining us on another one of the Florida TaxWatch interviews. I'm joined today with Senior Vice President Kurt Wenner, and we're going to be talking about the budget and the tax package. We're getting close to the end of the legislative session, and we want to bring you up to speed on where we stand. So, Kurt, let's just jump straight into it. I know the folks that are watching in today's conversation already know that the state of Florida has to pass a balanced budget. Each of the chambers has to agree on that. It's got to be done in about a little bit more than a week at the moment. How close are they? Tell us a little bit about each of the packages, House and Senate, and what are we looking at?
Well, the Senate came in with a budget of 108.6 billion, the House at 105.3 billion. That compares to current spending of 101.7 billion. It's a significant increase, particularly if you look at just general revenue, since there's not as much federal funds in the budget this year. The Senate is proposing a 14.4% increase in general revenue, which is really significant. But beyond that $3.3 billion difference in the price tags of the two budgets, there's a lot more stuff that they're going to have to haggle on, and there's big potential sticking points in education, healthcare, the environment, public safety, and also not to mention a unprecedented number of local member projects. So, a sizable increase in the budget was not unexpected, particularly with all the revenue that the state does have. It's the most in history. So there's a lot of initiatives that they're trying to fund, and they're just going to have to decide which ones. Starting with education, public schools. In the FEFP, which is the Education Finance Program, they're close as far as the basic numbers go. They both give a significant increase in per student spending, up over $8,000 a student for the first time ever. But there is one big difference, and that is the putting parents first adjustment. And this would take $200 million away from schools that defied Governor DeSantis's mask mandate ban. And they will take that $200 million away from those 12 districts and distribute it to the other 55 districts. That will be a big issue, I think. And then just within the FEFP, the House spent more money on the teacher salary allocation to keep bringing teacher salaries up. And the Senate put more money in the mental health allocation and the reading instruction allocation. Going on to human services, and the big issue there is always Medicaid. $39 billion program now has over 5 million people in it. Both of them fully fund the workload and price level increase, but the Senate goes about $1 billion more than the House, and this is largely due to requiring that all Medicaid providers pay their employees a $15 minimum wage, which is a recurring theme in the Senate budget. They also have a couple reimbursement rate increases. And there's a big difference on how they're going to treat dental care, if it should be in the managed care program or remain separate. And then with hospitals, both chambers are proposing some pretty deep cuts in what's known as critical care fund, which reimburses hospitals that have a high amount of Medicaid patients or charity care. The House goes a little bit further by cutting $100 million in Medicaid funding for all hospitals, which, this money is matched by federal funds. And the House wants to redirect this money to higher education for the training of future nurses. In the environment, Everglades restoration is always a big thing there, and both chambers are putting a significant amount of money into that. The Senate does provide an additional $400 million for the South Florida Water Management District to do projects that reduce more harmful discharges from Lake Okeechobee. There's a Senate conforming bill that's tied into all this. This is a part of the budget, And opponents of the bill, including Governor DeSantis and the Everglades Foundation, say that this would deprioritize funding for the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir, which is the water storage project they started a while back. And it would also change the rules regarding water use by agriculture. The Senate says, well, no, it doesn't really do that, but the opponents seem to think it does. So I think that's going to be an issue as well. There's more water quality improvement dollars in there, and the Senate has two major member projects that the House does not include. 65 million for reservoir in Palm Beach County and 39.7 million for wastewater treatment plant in Dade City. For land acquisition, both chambers provide almost $100, $90 million in the Senate for Florida Forever for acquiring property. But the Senate also provides $300 million to expand the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. This is a program that conserves land for wildlife corridors, water resource protection, and agriculture. In economic development, a couple issues there is the Florida Job Growth Grant Fund that the governor is recommending. The House funds that at $25 million, less than the governor asked for, and the Senate doesn't have any money in there at all right now. And also in affordable housing, the Senate goes about 70 million more at 337 million for affordable housing programs. The House only funds 268, which if you look at history is actually pretty good, but it's not all the money that's available. Big issues in corrections are, that's where the biggest dollar difference between in one agency is. It's about a $1.7 billion difference. The Senate funding more than the House. You know, despite the prison population that's been declining in recent years, the Senate is providing $1.3 billion to build two new 4,500 bed state prisons. The Senate's saying that these are more efficient, they're state-of-the-art facilities, going to be safe for both officers and inmates. And it will also allow for the closing of some really old, less efficient facilities that will save on maintenance and repair. So I think that's going to be something. They also want to build two new 250-bed hospitals to care for the aging prison population, which Florida TaxWatch has identified as a major problem, recommending an aging prisoner release program. But that's an area that is needs to be addressed. You know, corrections is having a problem now, particularly with getting enough staff to man these prisons. So the Senate's also going to increase the minimum salary for the officers to $20 per hour, and also provide some retention pay increases. They're also going to give more money to private prisons to increase their officers' pay and increase the per diem on the contracts. In the judicial branch, you know, there's a new 6th District Court of Appeal. The Senate is providing $50 million to build a new courthouse there. There is a argument over where it's going to be. The Senate wants it in Polk County, the House wants it in Pinellas, and the House does not have any of these construction funds for the new courthouse in its budget. Looking at some other issues in reserves, both chambers will have significant unallocated reserves, and they're also creating new reserves. You know, they've already passed the bill that will create a $500 million emergency preparedness and response trust fund, which gives the governor sole discretion over that money in case of emergency. You know, there's a difference of opinion among opponents and proponents of whether that gives him more or less power than he has now. But that's another $500 million that's going to be set aside. The House also wants to create a fund in case inflation drives the cost of appropriations beyond what is appropriated. There's going to be $2 billion in there filled with GR if this passes. And it's going to be called the Budgeting for Inflation That Drives Elevated Needs Fund, or the Biden Fund, which is a name that has been causing some conflict and will continue to create some conflict. But there's still going to be a lot of money left over no matter where it goes. And we think that's a good thing. You know, a lot of this money is non-recurring. You don't want to put it into recurring programs and you don't know what's going to happen. So we're glad to see that they didn't spend everything that they could. Both chambers increased state employee pay while the House wants to do a 5.4% increase across the board. The Senate wants to, again, focus on the minimum wage, increase every state employee's minimum wage to $15 per hour, well in advance of the constitutionally required deadline. They're also providing $100 million to address compression and pay equities in state agencies. And then they're targeting, as we said, correctional and probation officers, state law enforcement officers, firefighters, juvenile justice detention officers, and veteran home nursing. They're going to want to increase all theirs as well. All throughout the budget, there's about $1 billion in the Senate budget to increase the minimum wage, not just for state employees, but also for providers and people that contract with the budget. For, you know, we mentioned Medicaid providers, also voluntary pre-K teachers, employees at nursing homes, workers at certified rape crisis centers. So all throughout the budget, they want to see that not only are state employees paid at least $15 an hour, but people that work under contract with the state do as well. I think one of the differences we'll end with is member projects, which is certainly always of an interest to us. And this year is going to, there's a lot of things to argue about or haggle over. There's an unprecedented amount of member projects, which again isn't surprising due to all the non-recurring revenue that we have. But the Senate budget has nearly 900 projects that's worth $1.5 billion. That's way beyond anything we've ever seen before. This averages to 22 projects worth $38 million for each senator. The House has less than that, probably around 700 projects, but they're much smaller, so it's worth about 500 million. The House projects carry a lower price tag than the Senate because they tend to be smaller. Historically, member projects exceeding 10 million are extremely rare. But this year, the Senate budget includes many of them, including 2 university construction projects that both top $100 million. And we mentioned a couple of the big water quality programs. There's also some land acquisition member requests that are well in advance of $30 million. You know, comparing what they recommended this year to last year, the House budget proposed 137 million in member requests and the Senate had 360. So this is going to be interesting. One thing that we found is they did use general revenue to fund some things like local transportation projects, which we've always recommended as a better way to do that than taking money out of the State Transportation Trust Fund and programs that are already in the pipeline. So, you know, we'll be looking at all this carefully in our Budget Turkey Watch report at the end of the year and see how it all checks out. But I think, you know, there's going to be an awful lot of member projects, some which of course look very good, like they're very good projects and might even have more than a broader than just a local interest. But we'll see how that all shakes out in conference. So those are the big differences. There's some smaller things throughout the budget. We're coming out with a budget watch in the next day or two that details a lot of these and more differences. So look out for that. And you know, that's basically where we are.
Folks can find that Budget Watch report when it comes out at floridataxwatch.org. And I'd recommend you look at that. I know that, when you're talking about corrections or school or healthcare, environment, housing, economic development, Medicaid, member projects, it's a lot to digest. But Kurt, thank goodness you're here and managing on all of these items. And when you told me the other day that there were 1,000 member projects, I mean, you saw me almost fall out of my seat. It was just an amazing number to hear. So just very quickly, what are we looking at next? How would you summarize the next week and a half here in Tallahassee?
Well, the first thing they have to do is come up with what they call the allocations, which is how much money each silo has to spend. So the appropriation subcommittees will start with that, and they will start hammering out the differences. And then, anything that the subcommittees can't do, they'll bump up to the budget chairs, and if it goes farther than that, all the way up to the president and the speaker, although they'll certainly be involved the whole way. So the leadership will definitely make some final decisions on things like member projects and some of the other big issues. And so, one of the last things that you always see in the budget conference, in addition to these sprinkle lists, which add millions of dollars to the budget at the very last minute, you also see things like the final list for water projects, the member projects for water quality that they've been requesting. So there's just going to have to be a lot of negotiation, give and take, and even with money's supposed to grease the wheels of government. But sometimes too much can gum it up, because everybody wants something. And so we'll see how that works.
A great way to think about it. I'm going to switch to taxes in just a second, but a few things that really stuck out to me. Last year, we had a $101 billion budget. People need to be reminded that was $10 billion over the prior year. So, we're moving towards a direction where the work that you do and TaxWatch does in monitoring recurring dollars and the size of the budget and what is a good investment for Florida's taxpayers is actually pretty relevant. These member projects, I get it. There's a lot of dollars sitting around, but there's some critical questions that also have to be dealt with education, with Medicaid redetermination, with economic development, and we're looking forward to those conversations. And absolutely looking forward to this year's turkey report. I know that the budget turkeys are an interesting conversation, and we'll have those coming out shortly after session. But with the little time we have left, let's switch over to the tax package, because it's not only what we put out, but how do we collect these dollars? And why don't we start with the Florida House of Representatives? I've seen a tax package from them. How would you describe what's in that package, Kurt?
Yeah, the House came out with their package. Traditionally they do a House tax package. They don't move too many bills during session, individual tax bills, where the Senate does, and the Senate tends to kind of respond to what the House did. But the House package came out. It's not fully scored yet. They don't know how much all of the provisions are going to cost, but what they do have, and they added a bunch over the weekend. The Revenue Estimating Conference looked at them. It's going to be at least 325 million, and that's going to go up when other things are worked in. But generally, it focuses on non-recurring tax relief and also on individual taxpayers. There's relatively a small amount targeted to businesses. It has a broad bipartisan support, and it passed unanimously. Basically, the big ticket items are the sales tax holidays. There's 4 of those, including a back-to-school holiday, a disaster preparedness, a Freedom Week on recreational goods and tickets to events, which they did last year. And there's a new one this year for tools, equipment, and training materials that's needed in skilled industries such as carpentry. So people are going to be able to buy tools and work gloves and things like that tax-free this year if the House package passes. And the disaster preparedness and the back to school have been expanded to add a few more things. we're looking at, and they're both 14 days, which is long. They're looking at about $100 million for the back to school holiday. There's also some temporary tax exemptions. For example, impact resistant windows and doors, just a 2-year exemption for that. Baby and toddler clothing and shoes and diapers for 1 year. Energy efficient appliances, 6 months, and then children's books for 3 months. So those are temporary, makes it non-recurring, and they will go away unless they're reinstituted by the legislature. There's a few smaller sales tax exemptions that are permanent. They're reducing the tax on new mobile homes, cutting it in half from 6% to 3%. There's also exempting admissions to Formula One Grand Prix races, which I was surprised to see is worth over $5 million. The state exempt a number of sporting event admissions like NFL championships, the Final Four, All-Star games, that kind of stuff. So they're adding Formula One to that. And there was an amendment yesterday that would pass that is also going to add soccer. So there'll be another one on there. And the last permanent exemption is one for green hydrogen. This is hydrogen that's produced through a process using renewable energy, and it can result in 0 greenhouse gas. I think it's a very good thing. They want to not only exempt the green hydrogen, but also the materials, the equipment and the machinery to produce it, and the fuels that they burn. So that is the other one. There's some property tax stuff. Some relief for the Surfside condominium people, the horrible collapse down there. And they also want to kind of put that out in the future, make it available to other residential properties that are uninhabitable by catastrophic event. That provision, the future one, is caused some heartburn for local governments. They're afraid, a 100-year storm, what that would do to their tax base. They say it could create bankruptcies, but we'll see. They're going to increase the property tax exemption for widowers, blind people, permanently disabled from $500 to $5,000, and they're going to modify the assessment of agricultural property. There's also a proposed constitutional amendment that appears is going to pass. It's not part of this tax package, but it's off on its own. They usually don't put the constitutional amendment stuff in the packages, to create a $50,000 new homestead exemption for teachers, law enforcement, all sorts of what they're calling frontline workers. And that would be a significant help.
And by the way, you say pass, but that means pass. The legislature still got to go to the November ballot for Floridians. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the joint resolution, there's one moving in both the House and the Senate. If that passes, it will have to go to the voters. They made some changes to tax credits, increasing some of them and creating a new one for short line railroads, which I didn't even know was a thing, but we'll see. There's also, they passed an exemption for documentary stamp for loans that are issued during an emergency, kind of like what they did last year with the paycheck protection loans. We're glad to see that. That was a recommendation to the Florida TaxWatch COVID-19 task force. It doesn't really cost any money, but it's a good thing to have there if we come to it. Now, Florida TaxWatch has been saying, warning of a big corporate income tax hike that's coming when the rate returns to the original 5.5% this year and is on this new larger base. This doesn't really address that. They do adopt the federal code, what they call the piggyback provision is in here. But that's all. They don't address any of the other stuff. And one thing that's not really getting any publicity is the fact that by adopting this, the Internal Revenue Code, like they do every year, will adopt a change that was in the old Tax Cut and Jobs Act, but only takes effect this year at the federal level, having to do with research and development expenditure deductions. It's changing the way they do that, instead of being able to do it all in 1 year, they have to just spread it out, and they've added some things to it. Now, this was scored in another bill, and this is not included in what they have for the House tax package, but that is going to raise almost $800 million over 5 years. Only about 57 million in the first year, which will offset the big chunk of the House tax package. But over 5 years, this is actually, with this federal provision, is actually going to be a moneymaker. The whole tax package will actually increase net revenue over several years. The Ways and Means chairman said that they weren't done looking at corporate income tax, so we'll see how that goes. I think the Senate might be taking a different approach, but this could also end up in a conference committee situation. But we'll see if the Senate comes out with something before then, or if they wait to do all their negotiating in conference.
Now, you've been warning about this corporate tax increase for a few months now, and I know that the paper you wrote at the end of last year also included some conversations about the qualified improvement properties and the like kind of exchanges. Is this piggyback going to address those issues?
No, the House issue doesn't. It doesn't address any of the problems of the tax rate going up to 5.5% on a lot larger tax base. People some people kind of looked at the tax refunds and the rate reductions that took place in a couple of years as tax cuts, but that was an attempt to make the changes of the federal changes revenue neutral, and it helped mitigate that. But they actually paid, corporations in Florida actually paid a lot more than they had been estimated to pay before this all happened. Over the last few years, the taxes actually went up, and they're going to go up significantly beginning this year and certainly next at this new higher rate. The Senate has a bill that's really only been heard in one committee, but it does look at addressing some of these issues. It doesn't address the rate increase, but it does provide for adopting the interest rate limitation increase that was in the federal law, and also letting taxpayers do accelerated bonus depreciation, which will help mitigate some of that increase. But like I said, it's been heard in one committee. The House hasn't looked at it, so we'll see what happens when they get behind closed doors and start haggling.
Well, I know the folks that have watched this long are just like us. We're looking at the budget, we're looking at the tax package, we're recognizing the importance it is to Florida's taxpayers. And I'm so glad that you're on the case here, Kurt, and particularly that you're working with our Tax Advisory Council and others to really analyze these. So if somebody's interested in joining the Tax Advisory Council, you can contact us. We'll find a way to connect you with that. But as we close here, I'm going to ask you to give some final thoughts and predictions as we end into the last week, but want to highlight a few things. We've got a webinar coming up on March 30th. That's March 30th, a webinar that's going to do a session recap. It will have some of the dollars and cents kind of conversation, but it'll also be looking at the bills and issues that we've been focused on over the last year. That'll include things like data privacy, no doubt, and a bunch of other items that we've been writing about over the last year. Also want you to mark your calendar. The spring meeting is going to happen on May 11th and 12th in Tampa, and you can go visit our website at floridataxwatch.org to register or to find out more information. All right, Kurt. So handicap last week, what are we going to see? Is there any going to be any interesting floor fights that we need to know, or how do folks find out more?
Well, I'm never been good at predicting what the legislature is going to do, but they will finish. I know that eventually. We will have a budget. The only thing that they have to do when they come up here, I wouldn't be surprised to see the budget get a little higher. One thing that I didn't mention was neither the House or the Senate budgets address the $3.5 billion in federal money from the Fiscal Recovery Fund of the American Recovery Act. So that money is coming this year, and the legislature can basically do just about anything they want with it. We'll see if that end up getting worked in conference or not, or if they're going to continue to wait. But that money will go into general revenue and sit there if they don't spend it. So we could see something develop around there. You mentioned there's still a lot of bills out there that don't know what's going to happen. I think data privacy is a big one. The report we just issued on that explains some of the concerns. There's bills on telehealth and extending Visit Florida that Florida TaxWatch supports that are kind of held up on the floor right now. We'll see what happens with those. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Bills are traded, member projects are traded for votes. It's going to be interesting because, like you say, there's a lot of money, and that always creates some interesting situations.
Go to our website. You can read up on the Budget Watch when it gets posted later this week. We have a few other session spotlights that you should look at. Mark your calendar for March 30th, the webinar where we'll summarize what happened during this legislative session. And we look forward to seeing you all at our spring meeting on May 11th and 12th in Tampa. Kurt, thank you so much for this update, and look forward to the session ending on time and us providing our turkey watch. Lots of work ahead, but thankfully you're on the job. So
Thank you, Tony.